Hello everyone to the digital infrastructure workshop, and thank you to all the speakers and all the participants to joining us today. As you heard in the plenary session, we have almost 1.5 hours of time, and we will discuss several topics, and the key of this workshop will be three questions. The first one is what do we mean by future-proof digital infrastructure? So to get a view for the next 10 or 20 years for now. We want to define a roadmap, and in this roadmap we want to focusing on key digital infrastructures where to invest in the next years, and to gather and to build all together the concrete step to do this, so the strategic initiatives to successfully achieve this transformation for all Alpine territories. And we have the pleasure of having with us 5 speakers to participate to this discussion, and we organized the workshop with a first round from the speaker, then a final round where to go into the roadmap and the question. So I think we can start because the session is a little bit late. So I will welcome and give the floor to our first speaker, that is Franco Accordino. Franco, please join us. Welcome, Franco. And Franco is head of the unit investment in high capacity network from DG Connect, and we are very pleased to have you, Franco, today with us. So we will start this workshop talking about what will be the view for digital infrastructure in 10, 20 years? What is the strategic approach that the European Commission is fostering? And for the Alpine region, what are the key opportunities that region, municipalities, enterprises, they have to take?
Thank you very much, Carlo. By the way, many thanks for inviting me. I'm very pleased to be with you, even though this is a virtual presence, as you know. I'm here virtually present also with my beloved colleagues, Robert Henkel, that you know very well from previous editions. So what I'm delivering is somehow a kind of a joint presentation. He will be there in the audience. I can contribute if necessary. So very good questions to set the scene, Carlo. I'll try to take something like 10 minutes if you don't mind. Is that okay? So do I need some slides, or can I project some slides? Can I? I can do it on my own.
Yeah,
huh?
yeah, of course, yeah. You can share your slide, yeah?
Try to see how I do that. So I share the screen, and then this would allow me to project the slides. Can you see this?
Yes,
slide. I'll try to put it into the full screen mode in a way that we can see. Can you still see this?
Yes, perfect.
Excellent, perfect. So let's start from the beginning. So to reply to at least one of your questions. So where do we go? I mean, what is the prospect toward the digital decade, at least? Because when we speak about investments in infrastructure, we must have a long-term vision. You don't do these infrastructures for the day after. By the way, it takes a long time to deploy infrastructure. Once you do it, you need to do it with the prospect in mind, future-proof, as you said. So essentially, the vision is given by the recent Digital Compact's communication, which sets our new target for the decade, for the digital decade, we call it. So you know that our President von der Leyen insisted a lot to put connectivity, digital in general, but in particular connectivity at the center of political attention. And this is the first starting point. So there is no need to elaborate too much in terms of vision, because that sets the vision, new goals, you see it in the slide, 1 gigabit per second to all households, 5G in all populated areas by 2030. Those two targets add on and reinforce the target that we had set already back in 2016 or so for 2025. You remember these, So where we speak about targets for households, we speak for targets for socioeconomic drivers, the hospitals, schools, public administration, etc., what we call small enterprises which are digital intensive. So we set targets by using these important, let's say, objects that are to be connected, whether they are people, households, or socioeconomic drivers. This, of course, remains at the center of our policy, definitions and target definitions, but we need also to consider that the world is evolving. So besides connecting people and connecting households and socioeconomic drivers, we now know that we need to connect the small, what we call the small, the IoT systems, towards realizing digital twins type of scenarios where we mirror every single physical entity into the virtual space and the other way around. This requires unprecedented level of quality for the connectivity. It's fundamental. So besides this, we also have what we call the connecting the large, because those objects are going to gather data, and data are fundamental for the society of today and tomorrow. So being able to store, to process, to make sense of those data by making by using the most sophisticated level of analytics and machine learning, which require also computational capacities, the cloud, etc., etc. So all of these is what mean connecting the large infrastructure at the European level, what we call the main backbones. Of course, there is also there the very important emphasis and expectations on 5G infrastructures, which are particularly important, especially in cross-border contexts, because they, for instance, allow to implement connected and automated mobility, CAM type of applications along the main cross-border highways or railways, etc. So all of this, of course, means that in order to make Europe 5G ready, we want to start with the global scale. So putting in place the robust backbones for 5G along the main transport paths. But at the same time, we need to consider that there is a geographical continuum between the larger scale European deployment and the local dimension. It's very important. I will explain this. So we need to let 5G and gigabit connectivity reaching the local dimension, the rural dimension, the local communities, the small villages, including the ones that are really on top of the mountain in the Alps, in the Alpine region. That's our challenge. So there is therefore a geographical continuity or geotype continuity, but there is also a technological continuity that we need, of course, to take into account. So when we speak about infrastructures nowadays, we don't speak about only fiber or 5G or antennas or satellite or whatever type of technology we have in mind, or we need to bundle these with the digital capacity, other digital capacities, being them cloud or data processing or computing. So all of this because each investments that we do in terms of infrastructures has to generate value, has to contribute to what we call Europe's strategic autonomy, technological sovereignty, which is a fundamental. So we want really to fuel the kind of virtual value chains, spillovers, when we build an infrastructure. Very quickly, if we look at reality, well, this is the vision. If we look at the reality, unfortunately, not all regions of Europe proceed with the right speed. We progress, but we could do far better if we simply would get educated and get, let's say, more attentive at all levels to the importance of digital and connectivity in particular. So in particular, we see here the rural divide still prominent in our own monitoring systems. I'm referring here to the DESI. So the numbers there need some update. We will provide to you with maybe a revised solid number after the meeting. But of course, the risk is it was always there and is still there. For instance, if we look at the target for 5Gs, the way we have designed the policy and the targets is that first we go with the major terrestrial transport paths, then we enter into the major urban areas, and then last but not least, we will cover, and this comes with the digital decade, everyone, so including the rural. And this is, of course, under our radar, and it's very, let's say, important for us. We really pursue a digital society and economy that are inclusive, but we should not forget also that when there are investments, there are revenue, there are returns that needs to be considered. So, and in order to maximize, let's say, the effort in terms of fostering connectivity all around, it is important, of course, to invest. So there is a public investment where the private is not considering financially viable to invest, of the market failures. And secondly, we need also, once there are the funds, and there will be the funds very soon, also because of the recovery resilience facility, we need also to share best practices. We need to make sure that that there is a competence, that there is a know-how all around on how to transform these funding capacities into real projects that are delivering value, something which is not at all obvious. So more in numerical terms, you can see in this slide the window, very wide window of opportunities that let's say interested applicants have in Europe when deciding to fund connectivity infrastructures. So we have to fund digital in general, but also connectivity infrastructure in particular. So on the left side, you can see that we have the CEF digital connectivity, the CEF digital brand new program, which is funding connectivity for a total of 2 billion euro. Then we have InvestEU with the guarantees, and we have the more, say, classical but still extremely relevant ESI funds, the structure funds, the agriculture fund, the regional fund, etc., etc. Those will still play a very important role. So in addition, we have the RRF, as you know. So there are countries that are really committing to spend quite a lot on connectivity. Others that very legitimately desire to fund connectivity in another manner. But what is important is that we are generating an important momentum there. And then, of course, there are the private investments, which remain always important. So as you can see, all of these to support our connectivity objectives. Now, let's zoom a little bit into the digital Europe, the CEF digital program, which we are responsible for in our unit in the G-Connect. So I will not elaborate on all of this. I'll just give two examples which are relevant to the Alpine area very quickly. So you see there are 5 types of actions: the 5G corridors, 5G communities, so very strong focus on 5G, but also a number of backbones that are, as I mentioned, including the submarine cables. I think submarine cables are certainly not relevant to the Alpine region, but somehow there is also there some important holistic approach that connects all the different type of investments, because we are in a globalized world. So, and also the operational digital platforms. In this moment, we are finalizing the work program. We have a sent work program draft text to the member states some 2-3 weeks ago, and we still need some weeks or months to complete it. Then we are ready to go and launch the call, hopefully in September. So 2 examples. The first is the 5G corridors. So the aim here, as I already mentioned, is to deploy an interrupted 5G infrastructures connectivity along the main transport paths. So we really want to start from the real cross-border part, but we welcome, of course, the proposals that show that there is a continuum, as I said before. So besides the part funded under CEF, there are commitments that the member states, together with the other stakeholders, will continue the deployment of 5G infrastructure inside the member states in a more and more capillary manner inside the secondary roads, et cetera, et cetera. So this is one element. So this means that we welcome the blending with the other funds. So the characteristics of this investment is mentioned there. I will not repeat it, but it's certainly targeting a very specific user case, which is connected automated mobility, for which important quality of connectivity is required in terms especially of latency, but also bandwidth and stability, reliability, and symmetry of the infrastructure. So as I said, it's important to have a continuum from the major transport paths to the urban areas, which corresponds to the objectives, but also to the rural areas. What is important is that we bundle the connectivity infrastructure with the applications. So we are application driven, because too often we see infrastructure deployed and not taken up. There is a gap there between what is available and what is actually used. Okay, we can elaborate that the skills are important, but it's important that if we bundle the two together in the same investment, we achieve a better impact. And of course, in order to do that, we need to bundle the use cases with the other digital infrastructure, as I said, like the cloud, the data, etc. And in the infrastructure, we consider also not only people and households and the IoT as well. So the other example, I'll proceed very quickly, is the 5G communities. So this builds on the experience of Wi-Fi for You. We want to really join partnership with the local municipalities or valleys that are along all over Europe, in particular in the Alpine area, and say, do you have a very demanding application in the health, for instance, sector? I don't know, a distributed concept of care at home. So an elderly got an operation, we do the post-surgery at home instead of keeping the elderly into the hospital far away from its little village. And there we keep the elderly, the equipment, the medical equipment, which we put into the house of the elderly, always constantly under control, connected. Therefore, we need a 5G quality. So, and the 5G has to be also probably backhauled with the proper backhaul. So we want to do this kind of concept, and we want to create the best practice at the European level that can be used and reused all over around other programs. So that's an action. We want to support up to 75% of the grant, the total value of the granting of the total value of the project, budget of the project from this project. So, and this is an example on how we could combine budget from different sources. So as I said, we have healthcare, we have disaster prevention, for instance, avalanche prevention, for instance, typically in the Alpine zone. You need to monitor the system, you need to monitor the environment, gather the data, process the data in real time, maybe in the high performance computing in Jülich or rather in Bologna or somewhere else. And then that means that the local infrastructure is to be properly connected with these larger scale capacities at the European level, at the ESA scale, delivering ESA scale capacity. So, and this of course can be service of general interest, which doesn't entail any state aid issue with the service of general interest. But if you want to support also these SMEs or industry 4.0 manufacturing type of applications, you could do that, but of course, in that case, you would incur into state aid, let's say, verification requirements, as you can imagine. So the idea is, I'm almost finished, really to combine the demand, so the very demanding, let's say, ambitious use cases with the offer, with the supply, which includes the connectivity, but also includes, without any doubt, the other digital capacity. So in the little town in the Alps, we can have a fantastic cradle of innovation that can be valued and can deliver some value and emerge at the global level. But in order for this to happen, we need connectivity. That's the purpose of these action. Best practice, acceleration type of action. So the idea is to launch 100 or so best practices under the CEF digital program, which can be downloaded, adapted, and replicated town by town, valley by valley, okay, in order not to do the job twice, and use this as a kind of spillover effect in the other programs, being them RRF, national, regional investments, or whatever. And we want to share requirements, technical specifications, business models, and also the way to solve the state aid verification. That can also be shared. The way you do it, no, is a knowledge sharing kind of approach. Last but not least, it's the last slide. We don't start from scratch in this concept of democratizing connectivity or really fostering connectivity all over around. We want to start from the example that we had, Wi-Fi for You, where we could manage one way or the other after some time to engage with the thousands of small local communities. They are very enthusiastic. We want to harness this momentum and create really a kind of a viral process for connectivity, and therefore make Europe 5G ready and gigabit ready by the given targets. I finish here. Sorry for taking a bit longer, but I hope it was useful for the discussion. Thank you.
Of course, thank you a lot, Franco, for your very effective presentation and all these good messages for the Alpine territories. I think we are all impressed by the huge momentum that Europe is putting on the digitalization and specifically on the investment in the connectivity. So thank you. I think you mentioned a lot of things, but a very relevant action of 5G communities, BEXMO, Operation Digital Platform, and a lot more. Thank you. We can collect some question using the question and answer feature of the Zoom platform. But the question will be, if we have time, because we are very late, at the end of the workshop. Already some question is already addressed. They also, of course, Franco, for your intervention. I think there will be a huge interest about this. Thank you again. Now I have the pleasure to introduce.
There is a question there. There is a question from Luca. Do I need to answer now or can be done?
If possible, after, because we collect all the answers, maybe we select one or two at the end, just for a quick reply.
It's very quick this one. So the project mentioned there were projects from Horizon 2020, so those that were already funded. So no one is excluded in terms of possibility to apply to the future program. Okay, finito.
Thank you also to be so quick. Thank you. And now I have the pleasure to introduce Jan Dröge. Jan Dröge is coordinator of the European BCO Network. I ask to Jan to be so short also, so to take 5-6 minutes if possible. Of course, Europe is addressing all the connectivity issues, trying to build BCO networking, and BCO network is one of the key action here. I give the floor to you, Jan.
Thank you very much, Carlo. Thank you. It's an honor to be invited to your conference, and thank you for inviting us. And it's perfect to be able to speak after Franco. I think Franco just presented very well the challenges that Europe is still facing. We have very ambitious targets. I think Franco presented them just now, to roll out and the gigabit society and connect all citizens. But on the other hand, we see that despite significant investments over the last decade, there is still a real gap between citizens and businesses located in rural and remote areas versus urban areas. And of course, this is a challenge, notably in the Alpine region, where a lot of the geography makes connectivity a little bit more costly, and therefore outside of the main valleys, maybe there's an underservice of the connectivity. And it's in this context that the European Commission has created and launched the Broadband Competence Officers Network. And I will try in my 10 minutes or so to present you what is the Broadband Competence Office Network, what we do.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Jan. You have 5 minutes. Okay, so.
Okay, and
I'm
then
sorry.
yeah. So what is the network and how you can maybe learn lessons from other regions that are pertinent for the Alpine region as you think about going forward with your digital strategy. So as I mentioned, the Broadband Competence Offices, the BCOs, are single points of contact that have been set up in all member states and in many, many regions. The objective is to help all infrastructure, broadband infrastructure promoters, investors to overcome the hurdles. As was described, in rural areas, hurdles remain, and they can be technology-based, regulatory-based, access to finance. All of these issues have led to the fact that there is still this investment gap in rural areas. And the BCOs are there to try and address this gap. First, John wanted to show you the map. So you can see the red arrows, so to say, are all the BCOs in the member states. Some of them are crowded out by our very active regions. And this is why it's great to be invited to this, I believe, also Interreg co-funded project of dynamic regions. So I just wanted to do a little zoom in of this map because we have many BCOs actually in your space. And as you are thinking about developing and deepening your strategies on connectivity and broadband infrastructure, I encourage you to reach out to these stakeholders. And I know many of them are actually on the call and in the workshop, but still to reach out to them to make sure that they're embedded, because I know that, of course, as the Alpine Interreg project, you're driven by the regions, but in parallel, there's this EU network, EU finance network of competence officers that really, I think, can add to your strategy development. The main focus of the BCOs is specifically to address market failure areas. As you know, most telecom infrastructure investment is taken care of by the private sector. This is why we have more than 80% coverage in most parts of Europe. Most citizens have access to fantastic connectivity. So the job of our network really is to intervene where the market is not going. And to that end, we cover all these activities. As you mentioned, Carlo, I don't have that much time, so I won't go into too much detail, but we provide technical assistance to the project promoter, as I mentioned. We do this also by mapping the needs, the identification. It's a whole, let's say, science in itself, the needs assessment, the mapping of the investment needs, the access to the funding, the support to the programming, because as Franco has mentioned, there's significant EU money, both from the structural funds that I believe you all know, but also from the new Recovery and Resilience Facility that will offer huge opportunities. And the BCOs are intimately involved in the programming around broadband. So again, very important to stay connected with them. I'll talk about the good practices in a minute. But also the other aspect is telecoms is a highly regulated sector. Even if you have good ideas, you cannot do whatever you want. Yeah, you have to do it within a regulatory framework. And again, the BCOs are there to support you and guide you in also understanding the regulatory environment within which you can make intervention for infrastructure support. That's a short overview. And later, of course, I'd be more than happy to answer questions on these points in more detail. But to follow Carlo, I will go a little bit faster. All of your, let's say, countries that are involved in the Alpine space have been very active in supporting broadband investments for the last years. Germany has a program of more than 12 billion euro. Bavaria specifically over €1 billion. Austria has €1 billion, or in fact more now with the Recovery and Resilience Facility. Italy is one of the largest investors in digital infrastructure. France is very active. So is Slovenia. So all of the countries in your EU member states, Switzerland as well, but they're, as you know, not a member state, so it's a different story. But all of your member states are active. And I think by talking to your governments, you will get a lot of information access to how funding is done. Therefore, I didn't focus on this because you can talk to your stakeholders hopefully easily, and you have access to your BCOs in your country. I wanted to bring a couple of examples of how other countries that are faced with maybe challenges to bring connectivity to remote or not densely populated areas. Maybe the first one I wanted to mention, and for all of them, we put little links to explanations so you can go deeper into these projects. So these slides, I'm sure, will be shared by the organizers later. So feel free to have a look and get better acquainted with these examples. I just run you through them quickly. But in Lithuania, they used a combination of both the European Regional Development Fund and the European Agricultural Fund for Rural Development to provide wholesale access broadband to rural areas specifically, known as the PRIP and the RAIN projects, but whatever, they've had several iterations in order to have a nearly entire coverage of rural Lithuania with wholesale access. Catalonia used a slightly different approach in that they used anchor clients. And again, I think Franco mentioned this important role of socioeconomic drivers. The regional government of Catalonia identified mainly town halls, schools, etc., to bring fiber to these public sector, let's say, anchor clients. But by building this infrastructure, a lot of the core investment of digging the trenches, etc., was done, and that then facilitated the access to the backhaul for any other operator that then wanted to service private sector clients. So this, again, is an interesting example of how you can leverage public funds to service a wider community. Then I want to give the example of Greece, who did another very interesting combination, or in fact, they're still doing this, the project's still live. They are combining EU funds to, on the one hand, invest into supply side infrastructure, so basically rolling out fiber optic cables, submarine cables, etc., to ensure that connectivity is brought to the remote areas. But they're combining this, and I think there's a very interesting concept that actually Italy and others have, so to say, copied later, to combine this with demand side stimulation. So vouchers to end users to bring those populations or segments of the populations that are maybe not active in the digital economy, to bring them into the economy and actually create a market also for the investors into the infrastructure. And this virtuous circle, if I may say, I think has been a very innovative approach from Greece, and Italy is actually doing something similar and very also innovative in that sense. But as I said, Italy, you hopefully know the case already. So I want to bring you the Greek example. And finally, my last example, Carlo, is about Estonia. It's a small country, but with probably from all of our countries, one of the highest percentage of the population living in one city, and with very sparsely populated rural areas. I mean, it's a small country, but still in the countryside, it's they have real challenges. And they have actually been very innovative in that the government encouraged the private operators to create kind of a, it's not what it's called, it has a complicated legal status, but it's a little bit like a cooperative, where the operators share infrastructure to bring infrastructure to the otherwise underserviced areas. Of course, this is not necessary in the areas where there is already connectivity, but in the underserviced areas where otherwise there wouldn't be investment, they do it together on a cost-sharing basis, and then to connect the end user, it's a normal, let's say, market competition. So I just wanted to bring you these as examples because I know that you're thinking about a potential blueprint and roadmap of how you can bring connectivity.
Exactly, yeah. Thank you.
And there are many very inspiring examples that we've gathered in our years in the BCO network. I'll skip the next slide, which is maybe I can bring it back up if we go to the discussion, Carlo. So just allow me a concluding slide then. Oops. Why is it not going? Oh, sorry. Now, of course, it jumps too quickly. Voila. I just wanted to alert you to the fact, so the BCO Network, we're EU-supported project. The majority of the work, of course, is done by the network members in the member states and in the regions. We're running the secretariat, but the great work done, and I just mentioned a few examples, has been gathered in a database that is on DigiConnect's website, on the Digital Single Market website, where you can find a lot of good practice examples, many more than what I just mentioned, as well as some brochures. Some of them, of course, need updating now with the new generation of programs that Franco just mentioned, and we're in the process, but still as little handbooks and reference guides for you if you're planning this kind of, let's say, blueprint or roadmap, hopefully will be good tools for you. So I will leave it here. Carlo, of course, there's more to say, but I know there's more speakers. So if that's okay, I'll stop here.
I know, Jan, there is very lot to say more than we did now. Thank you for your presentation. I think, yeah, the key message is that in tackling the connectivity challenges, the Alpine regions and municipalities have not to go alone, but to take full advantage of the existing experiences and the ongoing activities, and the BCO network is the right place where to start. We come back for the roadmap and your final suggestion in the final round. Thank you again, Jan. And now I am very pleased to introduce Paolo Perucci. Paolo Perucci is from Friuli Venezia Giulia region. Is a BCO member, regional BCO member, and also is a member of AG5 and a point of reference with Valle for digital infrastructure. So, Paolo, the floor is yours to put in perspective what we did in the past years and why it's so important to have a view on infrastructure at the EUSALP level. So tell us what are the gaps to fill in this domain.
Thank you, Carlo. It's a pleasure to be here. And as you said, I'm a proud member of BCO Network as a regional BCO. And I think that the BCO network can provide a huge contribute also with the support of EUSALP strategy, obviously, on cross-border areas. So what I've done in very few slides, I try to focus on particular rural areas that are areas very close to the border and that are often left back. Action Group 5 has launched a feasibility study to analyze infrastructure connection gaps that happened 2 years ago, and which could be the opportunities within the Alpine region to connect to fill these gaps. This study was developed in cooperation with Topis Consortium and SDA Bocconi. So we started from analyzing the situation, and the situation showed us that several transnational backbones already exist, but obviously it's strategic to increase the density and the neutrality of the Alpine area. So we have the highways, and we need more highways, as Franco said, obviously during the corridor, along the corridor, across the corridor. But we also saw that national networks that are the local roads and the regional roads, often both public and private owned, are not so close to the border. And villages are the last frontier of the with fixed railway access. So there is a gap to fill about especially backhauling that was already mentioned. We thought about connecting large, connecting small, but Frank also talked about the continuum, and this is the continuum that we have also to invest on. And this I like very much this picture because I live in a cross-border region. We have a border to Slovenia and to Austria, and I often get the mobile network from Slovenia, even if I live in Italy. So sometimes the connections are easier from the other side of the border, and this connection will provide redundancy. That is a key requirement for high availability. And so this can be provided with an increasing of backhauling connection, also to close the rings and to serve towers that can serve users on the other side of the border. So this is important to explain. Which are the advantages that we expect? Obviously, they are both technical and human, but the technical have been already mentioned about speed and low latency. In terms of for the 5G connection, we cannot imagine that our car will stop driving 1 kilometer far from the border and give us manual driving, and then we cross the border and we get it back. So it's important to have the performance in terms of latency and speed also all over the region, and especially looking at the border where national links are missing. And this will provide obviously a better coverage and redundancy. There is also an important discussion about the data centers in terms of edge cloud computing, but we have no time to explain them. Other important advantages that were mentioned also by Mr. Gumina is about the increasing cross-country cooperation. And this can be done while building the infrastructures, but also in developing services that can be done connecting both nations. And this can improve and foster digital skills and information society in cross-border areas. This is obviously with the aim to invert the negative demographic trends, also by hiring people in telco and proximity data centers. And obviously, if you can provide more networks with a wholesale model, you get more telco, operate more telco, and get more and better services at lower prices. While analyzing the gaps, the study highlighted three types of fragmentation: about technical issue, internet addressing, naming, security; governmental fragmentation, which is about the framework, the legislative framework, or about privacy and data protection, or other sort of filters that can be given; and the commercial fragmentation, which is about ownership, then sometimes both private and public, and the business models or intellectual property protection issues. Whilst analyzing the new links that can be done in the Alpine region, 4 parameters have been taken into consideration. It was about the maturity of the existing connection, the availability of infrastructure, or which are the investment required, the use, access to infrastructures, the ownership, how many owners on each physical routes, and the complexity of governance. Which are the further steps? You can see, so with the 4 parameters, I invite you to look at the study. You will find the link in the slides. And there are some full feasibility links, some other which can need more resources. But the next steps are the assessment of the required investments, the involvement of the public and the private stakeholders, and in these terms, the EUSALP and the BCO networks. The BCO network can play a crucial role involving all public authority, then can give an edge also to private investors, and identify the funding model and the governance, the level of governance of such links. So I'm thinking about European economic interest groups or European group of territorial cooperation that are interesting model of governance. I don't know if I have just 30 seconds about practical application.
Yeah, just a few seconds. Yeah, thank you.
Look at the picture. We live in a beautiful region, and the Alpine region has several strength factors about its natural resources. And so you can imagine their laboratory. Mr. Gumina told about this. You can develop new ski technology. You can live reality augmented in a smart natural park, or more and more concretely it's a matter about dispersed hotellery in flats that are better than a tower in the city center, or smart mobility and logistics that have to be implemented, especially when the traffic is low and you can imagine smart solution for public transport. That's all for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paolo, to putting it in the EUSALP perspective and to remember the importance of cross-border backbones, not to forget the backhauling network at the regional level, and so big corridors, but also regional corridors and little valley mountains maybe, and to have a mixed technological approach to unleash the potential of all the practical application you mentioned at the end of your intervention. So thank you again, Paolo. And now I am very pleased to introduce Leonardo Camiciotti. Leonardo Camiciotti is the Executive Director from Topics Consortium. And I am very pleased to introduce you, Leonardo, because of course we cannot talk about the digital infrastructure without approaching data-oriented infrastructure and open ecosystem enable infrastructure. So, Leonardo, what are the trends about telecommunication and data infrastructure from the point of view of an internet exchange consortium? And what could be the opportunities and the future development you see in for the Alpine region?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. So thanks for having me here. So yes, indeed, I will go through some trends overview and a possible strategy or challenge we might take together. So in the, let's say in the context of telecommunication, there are several things happening right now. And of course, you have many more devices and people connected. So you have many more requirements and tighter requirements in terms of bandwidth, latency, so the speed of response of all the application. And of course, tight requirements in terms of security. These require, let's say, a more and more decentralized approach, a more capillarity of networks and presence at the edge. So the edge computing will be one of the mantra of this era. And of course, everything is going software, is being software-based, which blurs the borders between the traditional telecommunication and IT sectors. And that, of course, opens up many challenges, but also opportunities. And of course, this say pushes everything towards a federated approach in everything we are currently doing. And we are seeing also, as I said before, going towards a software-based approach. We are seeing a very, I would say, quite disruptive process in the telco model, where you're going from a very vertically integrated, I would say rather close and walled garden approach of the telco providers into a much more dynamic era where you have, let's say, more OPEX-centric networks and operations. This means that let's say the assets, the infrastructure will be, let's say, more general, and you will see much more added value on software-based services. So the value will come from service innovation, not from capital expenditure, which is quite a big paradigm shift in this area. At the same time, we are seeing, of course, the very, let's say, challenge / opportunity in the data area. Europe has been a bit lagging in with respect to the other big guys. I'm talking about the US and China to some extent, with the very different and totally different approach. But of course, now the data sovereignty, the collaboration, data spaces, skills, and economy are all the needed things to be take hold in order to fuel what is expected to be, I mean, what is the disruptive effect of the expected artificial intelligence era. So now the Data Governance Act has been released, which aims at giving a kind of structure, as Europe has been able to do with the GDPR approach. We are trying to give some framework, legal, but also architectural framework, in order to take hold the release, use and reuse and access to all possible data sources, which would be the fuel again for artificial intelligence based services and products, by the way. So now there is a very big effort, I would say pan-European effort, which is the Gaia X Initiative, which is now an association for European data and cloud. It's all started with 22 members, French and German, with a very big support from the respective governments. Now is the association is counting over 200 members from the overall Europe. And this is the big attempt of creating an architectural framework which put together, I would say, three main pillars, which is the infrastructure ecosystem, where you have the interconnection of different computing capabilities. So cloud, the service provider, high performance computing, sector-specific cloud and edge computing. In order to enable this would be, as the CEO of Gaia X says, there would be the pipes where you have the water, which is the data. And now the challenge is to create all these big data spaces in different areas, like in industrial, energy, mobility, financials, in order to, to access what is, again, the fuel for the application and services in different sectors. And this, of course, is glued by all these federation services, what is needed in order to enable a European-wide market and access to infrastructure and data, which will be a key strategic factor. Of course, this is aimed at regaining sovereignty, which doesn't mean that you exclude non-European players, but rather the opposite, that you create a very gigantic open innovation space where you cooperate with them and you try to add value on what is already existing, but of course, getting the control and putting in there some, let's say, European values. So not being a totally capitalistic approach as probably in the US, where you have private guys controlling the data gaming, and not all is governmental based approach like in China. So trying to be in between and trying to get the best of the two approaches. Of course, as far as we are concerned, we are an internet exchange, and so a network facilities that enables the interconnection between let's say internet guys, I would say, so with the different autonomous systems, if you want to say in a more technical way. And now also the exchange is undergoing a transformation, because of course the role of a kind of natural broker will expand to different layers. So you want to exchange only, I would say, only bits for in terms of interconnection at the lower layers, but also you will try to enable exchange of data, of computing resources, and of course of services. So it will be a much broader interconnection player in the area. And not only this will be required not only in a centralized place, but also will be very much distributed and more capillary, and therefore it will be a let's say exchange all, I would say, in every place. So you will interconnect whatever is needed in every place in a very dynamic way. And this is a big challenge, which is we are currently taking with our mates in this area. And so the challenge is also that you have to be capable in a dynamic way to keep the traffic local. So otherwise, if you take the traffic from the source back to the center and back to the edge, this will be, of course, a reason for congesting the network, but also it won't be good for those very latency hungry applications. So you won't enable those very future-looking applications. So this is a big and interesting challenging, and this will be needed in order to enable what has been already described in a previous presentation as a computing continuum. So you want a real continuum, so a seamless connections capabilities from the center of the network. So from the center, I would say even from the public cloud to the very far edge of wherever you want to deploy a very, say, application and services which leverage the data resources. So coming to the Alpine regions, those, if you want to look at as a problem, they are by definition edge location with less infrastructure. They are affected by digital divide and therefore becoming less populated, of course, affected as we are all affected by climate change, and in search of those sustainable ecosystem business models. But if you look at it from another perspective, these are big, very big opportunities, because of course, those same Alpine regions are a naturally defined ecosystem. So they're a natural candidate for innovative and very innovative at this stage pilots, because they, of course, are attractive. And we are seeing now in the pandemics area, unfortunately, edge location for urban and I would say network decongestion. So also they can become very powerful data collaborative areas, which by the way is a scheme of sharing data, and potential Gaia X compliant nodes, which is the current big challenge of Europe. So therefore they might become the very powerful poster children for a sustainable model at all levels, so social, environmental, and economic. So there, yeah, why not go for this federated data and infrastructure ecosystem that really aims at leveraging and building data collaboratives, let's say, going from what is the common notion of a data space, which is a vertical application of data in some sector, to a data place, okay? So it's being very transversal, and therefore building those pilot edge infrastructure and testing the Gaia X compliant data sharing. So trying to summarize, and that's my last slide.
Yeah, thank you, Leonardo. Okay.
Leveraging
just the last statement.
Yeah, people and skills. You have this data infrastructure and governance and continuum, which are the basic pillars in order to create this Alpine X, let's call it like this, ecosystem, which would be a counterpart, but very, I would say pilot, but very powerful pilot of what could be a very innovative area at the European level. Thank you.
Thank you, Leonardo, for your contribution coming from your field experience with the local view as an internet exchange, and the idea about what is so important not to be lagging on data strategy as an Alpine territory, and your final specific suggestion and the idea to start defining data space for the Alpine data place, some Alpine X, and promoting the creation of pilot edge infrastructure to start as soon as possible the test of Gaia X compliant data sharing infrastructure. So thank you, Leonardo, and stay there for the last round. And I welcome our last speaker. Is Clive Beckham, and I am very pleased to introduce Clive, who is the coordinator of the CARPE DIGEM project and an expert of territorial development, because are we sure that we don't need something else to ensure that all the territories go into this digital transformation, so not to lose the smallest one, as we called it before, and to support this specific digital transformation where the territories and the actors in the territories are so small that cannot develop best of breed technologies, but they have also to adopt these technologies and go through this complex process. So welcome, Clive.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Carlo. Thank you very much, Carlo and colleagues, for this opportunity. Thank you also to the previous presenters. And I think what my main objective today is to show how, in order to ensure that there is a successful digital transformation of the Alpine space, we really have to work from the bottom down. And it's, there we are. I think if you look at the traditional model for the Digital Innovation Hub, and I would like to actually use this term DIGEM, which is Digital Innovation Ecosystem, because the hub, to many people, I think this is the first point. If you if you're working on transformation, you need to use language that people understand at the local level. If you're talking to a senior citizen, if you're talking to a school teacher, a hub means something physical. It means something which is local and small. In the European context, it means something large. It's an ecosystem. So we use ecosystem because it means more to people. If you're going to enable access to and make use of infrastructure, and to answer one of Carlo's first questions, future-proof means it's being used and it's useful. You need to develop infrastructure which actually serves a purpose. And serving a purpose means to involve local stakeholders in an innovation ecosystem so they are players. Carlo mentioned in the very small, you need to give access to innovation to people in very small localities, but actually you need to involve them for them to become players. So going back to the beginning, these DIGEMs, DIHs, if we're looking at an Alpine DIH for marginal areas, because of this lack of density of stakeholders, of services, you've got to engage more people, you've got to engage local people. So the first stage is really looking at these, what we're calling rural or micro hubs, which really serve territories with services, with mediators, which actually include them in the digital innovation ecosystems. So I think that's really the first thing. If you're looking at that, the first thing is about this vision. I'm going back to some of the European documentation on this. Digital Innovation Hub report saying, number one, okay, you define regional needs. And if we're looking at a macro region like the Alpine space, you're actually looking at a whole series of different needs. So we were looking at the social, economic, and digital transformation, okay, of the Alpine region. So the first thing is to look at these needs and what you need in order to serve these needs. And the first thing we're saying is you cannot have within a macro region like the Alps a single digital innovation hub or even a single ecosystem based around principal urban areas. It's got to be very, very focused on the local areas and include them. So you've got to work on looking at creating these micro hubs, which are not simply there to transmit and include these areas through them adopting digital technologies, is actually to involve them in their development and design. So inclusion does not mean just the skills to use, it means the skills to innovate. So looking at the technical report, this is going back a few years now from the European Joint Research Centre. Rural areas lack the density of business and business networks. But one of the reasons for this is because there's simply not, there's not the physical and the digital infrastructure in place to include them. So this combination of assets is critical. Okay, so this is it. If you're working at the Alpine space to create this hub, you've got to have these mini hubs, these multiple partners throughout the Alpine space working together in order to create this hub, which is specifically focused on meeting common needs of marginal areas. So this is just a small illustration of perhaps what a local hub can do. I won't go, I know that Carlo, we're very short for time here, but really it's looking at these multiple functions. And there are several examples of this now, not only in Alpine space, but in other mountainous areas, where you're really looking at, you need mediation, you need the physical hubs themselves. We've been talking about Wi-Fi. You need the digital infrastructure, you need the teams, you need the creative hubs, the innovation hubs, the maker spaces. You need the teams who are able then to deliver on the ground the inclusion services. But unless they are networked within and between these hubs, they just simply become isolated or simply become feeders of services and information from outside. And this, I put data here very quickly, because there we're looking at what I call little data, because very often we're looking at very small amounts of data packages. But these need to then have use. I'll explain a little bit more about that later, but this is kind of a basis. This is what we need. We need the networks of these hubs which basically serve these functions. And quickly now, there's a kind of illustration of some initiatives in the Alps and beyond, which are serving this function. Looking here at the 4 DPIH hub in Slovenia. Here, we're looking at the digital needs of municipalities. And really what they're achieving here is to develop these packages for the municipalities based on their local priorities. So this is it. It's about digital tool development, testing and implementation. developing what we call Soroi Plus methodology, which is really an open innovation process to design new services. Okay. And it's the demonstration, it's the inclusion, it's the training, it's the mediation services. These are packages developed by a central body here in order to meet the needs of the municipalities. This is one example. We go on now to Ireland. It's the northwest of Ireland here. The focus here is on actually, and you can see here the innovation hubs here. There's a number of them within the rural areas of the northwest of Ireland, which are connecting with some of the key technology providers to be able then, within these local hubs, to connect local businesses with the key solutions. These businesses do not have access to this type of networks, but their local hubs do. So you need the mediators, the intermediaries there, who can then make the link between the technology and the services and the needs on the ground. In France, these are some examples, what I call local and multi-stakeholder networks. And two of these are from where I live in the Vercors Plateau in the east of France. Here we have the one they call La Bonne Fabrique, which is a local hub, which combines, it's a brewery. They make beer there, which is great. They've got a cafe, okay? They got a workshop, but it's one which has the digital technology, but also technologies to make, traditional wood products. There's a co-working space. So, but this is all within one location. That's one model that works in this very small town in the upland area of the Chartreuse, where I live and work, and this network in the right in the Vercors. We have 4 different type of hubs which are working together. There's a local innovation hub. There's a co-working space. There's one looking on the green transition. Another one looking at social transition through digital. We're working together. And then the Fabrique de Territoire, which is a territorial maker project near Paris. Again, here we're looking at a far bigger area, but now they're taking a living lab approach with about 10 different hubs, all working together with universities, with the city of Paris. So again, these are all different type of networks which are working together. Yeah.
I am very sorry, but we have left 3 minutes, then we have to come back to the plenary.
I'm finishing now. There's just 2 more slides and then I'm finished.
Oh, just the last statement. I'm sorry, but we are so late. I thank you. Okay, for the last statement.
So I just go to the very last slide here. The example I wanted to use here was on local food networks for this specific digital hub in the Alpine areas. What we're doing, just go to the previous one, you're mapping what's needed, what's happening on the ground. I'll go quickly on to the last one here. But actually, when we're looking at this digital innovation hub and what it can do, and here we're looking at the issue of interoperability between the different platforms which are helping to sell local produce. Because at the moment, there is no interoperability. They do not speak common languages. So that's, again, something where we can work on. Logistics platforms, the tools for logistics optimization. This, again, is a clear subject for the work of an Alpine hub. Every single local food network, every single local authority needs these tools in order to develop. There's posting and logistics platforms, regional macro EID hubs looking at blockchain. So there we are. That's an example of the way we can work together within the Alpine space, and just finish let's build it together. Okay, so there we are. You can also look at the slides and ask questions at another time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Clive. Thank you for your contribution, for your bottom-up approach, very inclusive, and the idea of a network of micro and the local digital innovation hub distributed in a small town and in the interconnected them in the multi-stakeholder networks, also with the first level European digital innovation hub. Thank you again. I'm sorry for the short time we had to discuss of this. Also, we are at the closing part. We have no time for further questions, but I thank you again, all the speakers, and I give, if Robert wants, just a last sentence to Robert Henkel to close this workshop. We have 1 minute, then I have to come back to the plenary. Robert, up to you, the closing.
Thank you very much. Give me the occasion for a last word in this context. I think it was a very interesting workshop, very complex, shows the complexity of our task and all the different levels of work we have to do, from the infrastructure until the organization of smart villages and small networks of cooperation concerning the implementation of broadband networks. And we have covered, I think, the whole picture of the problem, and also partly very detailed. And I hope for all the participants it was very interesting and informative. And I think we should go on with this work together and look forward to the next workshop. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roberto, for your support. And of course, as AG5, we are committed to bring forward all this work we are launching on. Thank you again.
You're welcome.
And see you in plenary.
Yes.